Hey, it's Dan. Before we get to today's podcast, a Hey Mary Kay podcast, I want to tell you guys real quick, just to ask you to do me a favor. If you could go find our socials and follow them, I'd really appreciate that. So on Twitter, X, whatever you call it now, it's Orange Brown Talk. Go give that a follow. On Instagram, I'd really love to up our Instagram following. It's Orange and Brown Talk. So let's go look for Orange and Brown Talk. You'll find us there. And I got something else for you guys. I started a TikTok. I don't know my way around TikTok, so much so that a long time ago, I started an old Orange and Brown Talk account. Can't access it anymore. It's just kind of out there. Don't follow that one. Find the one I just created. Orange and Brown. It's just orange and brown with a period in between each one. So just search Orange and Brown. If you see two accounts, find the one that has some recent videos posted to it. That's the TikTok. I don't know anything about TikTok, but I'm giving it a shot. So help me out and give me some followers. Okay. Enough for me. Here's the Orange and Brown Talk podcast for Monday. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe and Mary Kay Cabot with you. A Hey Mary Kay edition of the pod here on a Monday, the day after Super Bowl 60. The Seattle Seahawks are Super Bowl champions, which I think is interesting, Mary Kay, because that's a team that obviously I don't want to boil their season just down to what we saw yesterday. But in that game, that was a team with a dominant defense. I thought there were times when Mike McDonald didn't fully trust Sam Darnold in some spots, kind of said, you know what, we're good just sort of taking a field goal here or playing it safe here. They probably kind of got the sense that they were going to be able to shut down New England too, so why force it? But an interesting outcome if you're a Browns fan and you're trying to find some hope for your football team. Not saying the Browns are going to go to the Super Bowl next year, but you have a pretty good defense in place. Obviously, they've got to fix a lot of things on the offensive side, but as you sort of look for paths forward on how to build this thing, I think Seattle offers an intriguing template.
Yeah, they really do. And that game kind of went the way, not exactly, but it kind of went the way that I thought that it might, just having watched their defense through the playoffs and the last part of the season to see how dominant that defense was, and then to see how Sam Darnold was doing his part on the other side of the ball and really, really doing a nice job with that. These were two such great defenses that it was hard to get anything accomplished from a passing game standpoint. But I do think it does offer the Browns a little bit of a path forward. We've been saying all along, they have to have a quarterback to go along with that amazing defense of theirs. They really need a quarterback the caliber of a Sam Darnold. It doesn't necessarily have to be the league MVP, but it's got to be somebody really, really good that can go out there and match the caliber and the intensity of your defense and throw some touchdown passes and not turn the ball over. So that's what they've got to look for. That's what they've got to find. And at this point, at this moment in time, I truly don't know if they really feel that they have a front runner for the job.
Yeah, I agree. And look, Sam Darnold wasn't perfect this year, but I mean, I think that sort of speaks to as well. You don't necessarily have to have the perfect solution, but it's just interesting the way they looked at Geno Smith and said, you know what, we're good. We're going to trade him. We're going to be the team that pays Sam Darnold. And he was pretty good this year. He had 20 turnovers, but honestly, I thought he didn't have any in the postseason and had to go toe-to-toe in that Rams game. And I think he's a big reason why they won that Rams game in the NFC Championship game. And then yesterday, it was really just like, we don't need you to be a superhero. We can win this game with our defense dominating. And I think they got that sense early in that game that they were going to have the Patriots on their heels offensively. It was like, just don't force it. Let's just take what's there. Let's take points when they're there. And then you get that opportunity to throw that touchdown pass late in the game that essentially put it away. It was just a very interesting approach, I thought.
It was. And the Browns already have some decent pieces on offense, including, of course, if Quinshon Judkins comes back healthy, which they need him to do. And they already have their future Pro Bowl tight end in Harold Fannin Jr. So that's really, really good. And now they have to build around the rest of that offense. They've got to get going on the offensive line. They have to figure out who the quarterback is, but they do have a few pieces to work with They really want to revive Jerry Jeudy. I wrote that in my insider for Sunday. For all of the people wondering how they feel about Jerry Jeudy, they want him back. And they want him back in his Pro Bowl form, in his 1,000-yard season form. That's what they're aiming for with him. That's what they're hoping for. So they feel they have a good, solid building block in him. They've got Harold, they've got Quinshon, they've got Dylan. Uh, I'm sure they expect that Isaiah Bond will take a step up. I'm sure still feel good about Cedric Tillman. So they do have some pieces to work with. Now they have to pull it all together, and Todd Monkin has to find his QB, and then they've got to match that whole offensive side of the ball and keep that defensive side of the ball up to the high standards that have been set over the last 3 years here. But both of those teams yesterday, I think, really set the blueprint for having an amazing, amazing defense to get you where you want to go.
Well, and I think the other lesson too from that game is if your offensive line isn't going to hold up, doesn't matter who you have at quarterback, you've got to be able to protect him when you go against a team like that, especially. Look, the Patriots spent a pretty high draft pick on Will Campbell, and I don't know if he is going to be their solution at left tackle long term. But you've got to make sure that you've got that offensive line shored up, and that's really one of the key points here. For whatever people want to say about Jerry Jeudy or Cedric Tillman or Isaiah, but whatever else, like none of it matters if you don't figure out this offensive line that is very much in transition this offseason. Obviously, it would help if Joel came back. We'll probably get word on that soon. But they've got a lot of pieces to replace on that offensive line. And we saw yesterday what can happen if, Seattle was just dominating up front.
Yeah, and it's hard to pick a good offensive lineman. It really is. It's hard to get it right, as the Browns discovered with Jed Wills in 2020, right? It's very, very difficult to project and to nail those picks sometimes. Sometimes it's tough. And sometimes it takes those guys a while to develop. And I think it's just for whatever reason, it seems to be one of the harder positions to project into the NFL. It just is. So I think it's difficult, and I think it's risky. You almost want to find someone who is already established so you don't blow that first round pick on a left tackle or a tackle that's not going to make it. It's really tricky. I mean, I can't rattle off a bunch of names right now, but we'd have to go back and do the study of how many left tackles have really lived up to their draft status in the last decade or so. I know there have been plenty of busts in that category, plenty that have made it, but I think it's very, very difficult to do. And I know that's what everybody's going to want. And I know that that's what the Browns are going to be projected to take probably at number 6 overall. But if you're going to do that, you have to get it right. And it's hard. It's hard to do. Maybe you trade down and you see if you can get one at 10 or 12 or whatever. But it's a very, very tricky proposition to try to land one of your tackles of the future that high in the draft.
Well, we'll see if Andrew Berry has changed his stance on the whole right versus left thing, because a couple of these guys are guys you'd be taking that have been playing right tackle, and maybe you keep them there, maybe you move them to the left side. Like we'll sort of see. That was one of the things with Jed Wills when they drafted him. Andrew didn't seem to mind that he was playing on the right side and move him to the left side. So I'm assuming that hasn't changed, but again, these are things we'll ask him at the combine. We'll see if he gives us answers. And that'll maybe inform us a little bit with what they're thinking. Let's go back to the big story from last week, and that is, of course, Jim Schwartz resigning as Browns defensive coordinator. And this comes from Jim Jensen in North Canton. Hey, Mary Kay, you answered Jim's question about trading a coordinator. The Browns cannot trade a coordinator. Is there any chance there's a back door to satisfy Jim's desires to move and the Browns wanting to let him go with some kind of benefit to the Browns? Or is this a closed deal with no outs?
It's a great question. And all I know for sure is that you cannot trade an assistant coach. So I know that you cannot do that. And the other thing that we know is that the second year of his 2-year contract that he has left with the Cleveland Browns, they have his rights for 2 more years. The second year is a club option. So do the Browns just decide not to exercise the option and let him out after that? And then he can get back in the league? in 2027. I suppose if they're in a magnanimous mood and they want to do that out of the kindness of their hearts, they can do that. Because sometimes you don't want to burn bridges in the NFL. Sometimes you want to show other teams and coaches and people that you are flexible, that you can work with them, and that you're a great organization to work with. By the same token, you can't let people walk all over you. You just can't. You can't have coaches deciding that they're going to walk out the door on you and they want to go somewhere else. So you do have to establish that you mean business, and if someone is under contract with you, that they need to fulfill their contract, unless there is some extenuating circumstance like in the case of Bill Callahan, when he wanted to go coach with his son, and the Browns were not going to stand in the way of him having that unique opportunity. So at this point in time, I don't see a path forward for him except for sitting out the next 2 seasons. But once again, sometimes time changes things. Sometimes there are discussions that can be had and deals that can be made. So I really don't know what the answer is going to be or how this is going to turn out. But at this moment in time, I think the Browns are intent on just letting it play out and having him let the contract expire after 2 years.
I do think because of the option, it seems like there's an easy way to sort of hold your ground there and also, play nice a little bit. And that would be hold him to this year. And then, to me, picking up that option would feel petty. Like at that point, you're just kind of being petty about it. So if you want to kind of hold him to it this year, great. Then kind of let him go. Because look, Jim didn't do himself any favors. we all saw the reports right after they made the Todd Monkin decision. I still think there's probably some universe, and you did some reporting on the meeting that he had with Todd Monkin over the weekend. I still think there's probably some world where he maybe could have handled this a certain way, and maybe him and Todd could have sat down with the organization and said, look, this just isn't going to work. We can't work together, or Todd doesn't feel, you know what I mean? Like there still feels like there could have been a way that this could have been handled amicably, but I just don't think Jim helped himself. And look, the Browns deserve some of the blame too for maybe assuming that it would just work. But again, Jim did not help himself with the way it ended.
No, and I think that's why they are not rushing to accommodate him right now, because he's leaving them basically in the lurch, right? This is their amazing defensive coordinator. Their players love him. They felt he would pair very nicely with Todd Monkin if those two could have worked it through. And they wanted to have Todd on the offensive side of the ball, his mirror image in Jim on the defensive side of the ball, and let these two guys have that synergy together and try to take this team to the next level. And I think it could have worked if it all didn't have to happen so fast. Now, as I reported in my insider, these two guys had a great meeting. They sat face to face and had a really good, positive meeting. And Todd tried to talk him into coming back. And Jim just wasn't in a place where he felt like he could do that right now. He just wasn't there. I have to wonder if he had had a little bit more time to think about this, if some of his players could have reached out to him, if Myles Garrett could have reached out, Denzel Ward and some of these guys, and said, we really need you back. Maybe that changes your feeling about this whole thing a little bit as time goes on. And once again, you throw a little bit more money at it and see if you can't entice him to come back. I know they did throw more money at it, but not even that was enough to change his mind, because he really wanted this job. And he did come close to getting this job. He did come close to getting it. I think in the end, it really did come down to Todd and Jim. And then they just decided that they needed to go with the offensive plan that they felt would get them to where they want to go much quicker than the offensive plan that Jim Schwartz was able to offer. And it wasn't that they needed an offensive guy in the head chair. It's that they needed an offensive plan that they felt was going to work for them. And they just felt that Todd, who was going to be able to bring over all these coaches from the Baltimore Ravens, that trumped whatever Jim was proposing. on his side of the ball. I mean, on the offensive side of the ball. It wasn't as good of a plan as what Todd was able to offer. So I don't think that they're feeling very generous with him right now. I think they're wishing that he would have come back and fulfilled his contract. And he just could not bring himself to do it. He was very upset by this. He was very, very upset by this from everything that I understand. And understandably so. I mean, his heart and soul has been in this defense. And this is also the place that he started his career. He loves the Cleveland Browns, or loved the Cleveland Browns. And he was going to come full circle by being the head coach in the place where he started his career in 1993 as a scouting intern, making no money whatsoever under Bill Belichick. And then you come back, you sign a 5-year contract worth somewhere between $50 and $100 million. That's the going rate for a good coach these days, $10 million to $20 million bucks a year. And it just didn't work out that way. So it's funny because over the weekend, I kept on thinking, what if he just called back? What if he just called back and said,
we did get some people ask, like, is there any chance that Jim could still, is the door closed? Could Jim still salvage this?
I think he should. I mean, it's not going to happen, but I think he's the best option for them. I think he's the best coordinator for them. And I think it's the best situation for him in terms of making money, having an opportunity to come back. That's a great way to get out of this contract early, is to get a head coaching job after this season. So I think it would have been the best opportunity. And I do think that in a perfect world, that he would just pick up the phone and say, you know what, I made a mistake. I want to come back. I've heard from 10 players since I handed in my resignation. They really want me back, and I'm going to come back and do this job. But that's just crazy wishful thinking on my part. It's not going to happen.
Well, I thought it was best for everybody if he just left to begin with. And I think him coming back now with this new added layer would just add to whatever potential trouble. Again, I just keep thinking, like, you don't know what you're doing at quarterback yet. You're going to have this super young offense. It's probably going to take a little time for this thing to get cooking a little bit. Maybe they hit the ground running. Some of it might be based on who they play early in the year too. And if that offense is struggling and you're 1-3 and the defense is playing lights out and Jim Schwartz is out there every day, every Thursday talking to the media, and Miles is up there every Friday talking to the media, I think it makes life hard on Todd Monkin. That doesn't mean it couldn't have worked. You know, maybe it would have. Maybe they would have started off great and it wouldn't have mattered. But I just think this added layer of him now just resigning, like not even making them fire him, but just resigning, is like, it just adds more to what I think could have been an explosive situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a deal breaker, of course. I mean, it would be hard to turn that one around. But I keep looking at the Myles Garrett situation from last year and saying, who amongst us thought that Myles Garrett would be able to come back here and have everything work out beautifully? But it did. I mean, it worked out to the point where he set the sack record, became NFL Defensive Player of the Year for the second time. And at this time last year, that looked almost impossible. So stranger things have happened, but it's not going to happen in the case of Jim Schwartz. And at this time, I just don't see any other option for them but to stand their ground and make sure that that he doesn't go anywhere, at least for 2026.
Okay, this is a fun one. It comes from, it calls himself Juan's World in West Virginia. And we're talking draft now. Welcome to the day after the Super Bowl. We're getting into the draft. Hey, Mary Kay. Jimmy Haslam admitted swinging for the fence and missing on the Watson deal. Well, the Browns still need a quarterback. So why not swing for the fence again and offer the Raiders 2 number ones this year, a number 2 in 27 and 28. So that would be 4 first-round picks. Plus releasing Jim Schwartz from his contract, and the Browns get to draft their generational quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. Again, you want to talk about swinging big, that would be swinging big. 2 first-round picks this year, and then the next 2 first-round picks to jump up to number 1 and get the guy that feels like the only real sure thing in this draft, Fernando Mendoza, who at this point feels like he's all but a Raider. Unless maybe somebody can can blow the Raiders out of the water with a trade offer.
Well, I guess it would just depend on if the Raiders are wed to drafting Fernando Mendoza. I think they are. It seems like that's the way that's going to go. And I certainly wouldn't give up all those first round picks. I would not swing for the fences like that because they're still recovering from losing those 3 first round picks in the Deshaun Watson trade. I don't think you can go that many years uh, and give up that many first round picks in a span of 10 years or whatever the case may be. So I would definitely not do that. And, I don't know, unless you were absolutely convinced and sold that he is the next, who would he be? I don't even know. I don't know even
I mean,
what
I
the
think
concept is.
I think that's the problem is like I think Fernando Mendoza is good, but what is he? And like, is he going to be a top 15 guy? Is he going to be a top 10 guy? Is he going to be I don't think he's going to be like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or someone like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but like that's part of it too is what sort of quarterback are you giving up all of those assets to get? And I don't know if he's going to be one of those guys necessarily. He might just be like a top 15 guy, which if you're the Raiders and you already have the number 1 pick, great, take him. But if you're going to start talking about giving up 4 first round picks to get him or something like that, I don't know if you do that.
No, I would definitely not do that. I wouldn't. It's too big of a risk. They don't have that kind of a risk in them right now with what happened with Deshaun Watson. They have to be judicious with those first round picks. They're lucky to have 2 again this year. They might have 2 again next year because if they trade down out of number 6, they could end up with another first round pick next year. And I think some of it is going to depend on which quarterbacks uh, start to catch that buzz and we find out who's going to potentially go in the top 10. Is it just going to be Fernando and Ty Simpson? That's what it seems like at this point. So we'll have to see about that. And then there are some other little QB things floating around out there in the NFL. I'm seeing things about Derek Carr possibly deciding to come out of retirement and come back. That's an interesting proposition. Um, they passed on him in 2014 and drafted Johnny Manziel instead. That would be interesting to see if they decide to right that wrong. Um, Cousins is going to be let go by the Falcons. I don't know if that's a fit here. Malik Willis, I've heard that that's probably not going to be an option here, that there's a chance he's going to end up in Miami. So it's not a great year, once again, to be needing a quarterback. And unless they have something up their sleeve that we do not know about, I think that they are potentially going to be looking at, once again, Deshaun Watson versus Shedeur Sanders. But, we also have heard on, on the Browns' own website, him saying, and Andrew Berry said the same thing when I asked him about this in the sidebar interview the other day, that they're going to leave no stone unturned and they are going to look for quarterbacks either in the draft, free agency, or a trade. So it's not over yet. We don't know exactly what that quarterback room is going to look like yet, but I would not be giving up multiple first round picks for Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, I'm just not sure if he's like that guy. Now there might be one of those guys next year, or 2 of those guys next year, or something like that. I don't know if Fernando Mendoza is that guy that you'd want to go that all in to get him. But I keep coming back to this idea of like a Garrett Nussmeier, who after week 1 of the college football season this year was QB1 basically. Like that was the guy, and I would joke that just give him his New Orleans Saints uniform right now with his dad coaching there. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who's a coach's son, super talented, had a great year last year, and then, well, 2 years ago, and then last year was dealing with injuries and just a really chaotic situation at LSU. Still a super talented guy, though. Still a guy that, again, we're not even talking about coming into the year. After like week 1 of the season, people were calling him QB1. So I don't know. Like, can they find some value in a guy like that in the second round or the third round? I don't know where he's going to end up in all of this. Maybe he flies up draft boards once the whole process starts. But I just keep thinking, like, let's not rule out some of these guys who might not, who coming into this year, I mean, a few years ago, Carson Beck was the top quarterback in the draft to start the season. I'm not a huge Carson Beck guy, but again, you have to consider some of these guys who were top prospects at one point are still going to be sitting there maybe on day 2, day 3. Like, maybe you can add another guy, and maybe that guy's not going to be your franchise quarterback, but you can add another arm and another piece, take another swing, I guess, with a guy like that.
Right. And they've got a lot of picks once again in the first couple of rounds. And so maybe you can take a chance on a guy like that. And we also know that Carson Beck was at Georgia when Todd Monkin was there. So he knows him very well. Um, as you mentioned, Nussmeier, I mean, these are guys that we're going to have to start to figure out at the combine. What is the buzz about these guys? What do teams really feel about these guys? Where are they being slotted? Where are they projected to go? And even then, you really don't know, because we did not know at the NFL combine that Shedeur Sanders was about to take the free fall of a lifetime from the projected first round to the fifth. We did not know that at the combine. People were still talking about him in pretty much glowing terms at that point. And I think we still thought that there was a chance that the Browns could possibly take him at number 2 overall at that point. I don't think we had any inkling that he was about to drop out of the first 4 rounds of the draft. I certainly didn't. So we really don't know yet where these quarterbacks are going to fall. What we do know is that once again, it seems like the better quarterback draft is another year out, that it's going to be in 2027 when you've got Lenoris Sanders and you've got Arch Manning coming out and a number of other guys. That could end up being one of those classes where you've got 5, 6 guys once again going in the first round. That doesn't appear to be the case at all for this year. It just didn't turn out to be the class that everyone thought it was going to be. And when the Browns made that trade on draft day last year, I think they believed that this class was going to be a marquee quarterback class. And it just didn't work out that way. So now, maybe you push it out another year and see what you can do. But I don't think that there are a lot of veteran quarterbacks that are going to be available that you can say, okay, we need to go pay this guy a ton of money. I just don't know if they're going to be willing to do that. And then when you look at the rookies, you have to ask yourself, is that rookie and what we would have to do to develop him, is he going to be better than Shedeur Sanders? And they're going to have to try to figure that out. It's a tall order, and it's going to be one of the first big tests for Todd Monkin. It's going to be one of the first big tests because it's going to come back to him more so than anybody, I think, on who they start at quarterback and how that works out, because they have given him a large voice and a large say in this. And he's going to have to nail it, and he's going to have to get this right.
Yeah, and we're going to find out too, like how badly do they want to see what they have in Shedeur Sanders, right? Because if you go out and you sign Derek Carr, you're not bringing him in here to be the third string quarterback, or if you brought in Kirk Cousins, and that's a whole other pod, those two guys. But if you brought in a veteran like that, those guys aren't coming to Cleveland to sit on the bench. Those
No.
guys, first of all, Cleveland's not going to be their first choice. So if they do come here, they're coming here to play, and they're coming here to show they still have something left. So that's kind of saying, all right, we don't really believe that Shedeur Sanders is a guy that we want to take a longer look at. Or again, we always talk about Deshaun Watson. He's still just in this mix, and he's still just hanging around. And again, you wonder, does Todd Monkin look at some of that, go back and look at some of that Houston tape? And obviously that feels like decades ago at this point, but does he think maybe there could still be a little bit of that there, even if it's not exactly what it was back in those days? I don't know. We're gonna get answers to this stuff even without getting answers, because this is one of those actions speak louder than words situations once we get to the new league year and then we get into the draft.
Well, we know that he is intrigued by Deshaun Watson because he told us that. Todd Monkin is intrigued by Deshaun Watson, and so are other people in the organization. They really liked what they saw in him. And if they could get a version of Deshaun Watson that is closer to what he was in 2020, then who knows where that could take them. Once again, if you have that great of a defense and you have a lot of other pieces around him, maybe, just maybe, they can get something out of him. And I think they would love to do that. I think they would love to salvage something from this trade. So I know they're not going to take that lightly. I know they're not going to take it lightly. And if they can somehow turn Deshaun Watson into a top 15 quarterback, they would be delighted to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's the key is you don't need him to be the 4,823 yard guy you thought you were trading for, the guy that led the league in yardage. And you don't need him to be that. You need him to be a guy that can protect the football, make a couple plays with his legs, make a few throws here and there when you need it. What did we talk about at the very top? They didn't need Sam Darnold to be Superman all season long. They just needed him to do his job. And if you have a really good defense and they can fix that offensive line, then you just need a quarterback who can do his job. And at some point you'd love to find that Superman quarterback if you can, but if you can't, you got to find the guy that can just come in and run the offense and do his job. And it'll be, we've seen Todd Monkin work just his last two NFL jobs with two very different quarterbacks. And Jameis Winston, big armed guy, not real mobile, turned the ball over a ton, but he did get a lot of production out of him. And then, of course, Lamar Jackson Lamar Jackson is one of those guys. Probably not getting the Lamar Jackson out of this, but can you find somebody that can just do what Todd Monkin needs him to do?
Well, that is a big question mark. And we know that Todd Monkin prefers a running quarterback. He is all about the dual threat quarterback. And he's just coming off of 3 years with Lamar Jackson, and he sees what that can do to a defense. Just like in the same way he saw what a Myles Garrett could do to an offense, he knows what a Lamar Jackson can do to a defense. He knows what it's like when a quarterback can extend the play and take off running and do all of those kinds of things. So I think in a perfect world, he would like to have a genuinely mobile quarterback who can run, who you can design runs and plays around his ability to take off, RPOs and all those different kinds of things. So we know he likes that, or he prefers that. Now, if he doesn't have that, does he feel like he can win with a quarterback who isn't necessarily like that? I mean, Shedeur has elusiveness, and he showed that he can extend plays, and he has good mobility, but you don't really classify him as a dual threat quarterback in the way that you do a Deshaun Watson, or at least a Deshaun Watson 4 years ago, or some of these other dual threat quarterbacks. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what Todd Monken's evaluation is of Shedeur Sanders and what it is of Deshaun Watson, and if he thinks that he needs to go outside of the building and bring someone else in.
And you talk about that Shedeur, not to just keep taking this back to Sam Darnold, but again, the plays Sam Darnold did make yesterday, how many of them were just as simple as I'm not going to take a sack here?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to get here comes a free runner. I'm not going to get sacked. I'm going to elude him and make a positive play, or at least not lose a ton of yardage on a sack. Like that was big yesterday for Seattle and the way they wanted to approach that. So let's get to this question as we're now about a week after Todd Monkin was introduced, and this comes from Rick LaPaglia in Clifton Springs, New York. Hey, Mary Kay, can you assess if there is any more sense of comfort or an increased level of confidence among Browns fans about the hiring of Todd Monkin and how it could elevate the level of play on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, I really do think that once fans dig in and see what he's been able to do in the past, see what he's been able to accomplish everywhere he's been, and see how he really gets these quarterbacks to flourish under his guidance, I think that Browns fans will start to see what he's all about. And then he just also brings that mix of old school discipline, but like Jim Schwartz, he also embraces analytics. He loves data. He loves information and data. And the Browns love nothing more than to provide all of that data and all of those analytics. So I think that Browns fans are going to start to see it and they're going to start to get it, but it's going to have to come together pretty quickly because you're going to be implementing a whole brand new offense. Now, it worked fine in 2023 with the Ravens. I mean, when he came in there, I mean, they hit the ground running and they did really, really well. So as long as you've got Quinshawn, you've got your quarterback, you've got some of those pieces on offense, I think Browns fans will see the wisdom in this hire before too long. But it's got to come together quickly, and you've got to make sure that you have the quarterback. You can't like make a judgment error on that. You just can't really get that wrong.
Yeah, and I do think fans have warmed a little bit to it. I don't want to put too much stock into, the Twitterverse and just seeing a few tweets here and there, but I do think I think the initial reaction was like fans kind of got themselves excited about like hiring one of those young guys. And that's a very exciting thing. Oh, we're going to hire maybe this guy will be the next Sean McVay. You talk yourself into that. And then it was like, oh, Todd Monkin. But I think once they got over that initial kind of shock or just sort of, okay, I think they realized the Browns hired a pretty good offensive coach and a guy that is pretty accomplished. And that doesn't mean it'll work, but I think there's a chance because of that. And I also think I thought of this when you were talking about the quarterback thing and how hard it is to maybe implement this new system. I almost think that's why they need to just sort of pick a quarterback and do it quickly and not waste time. Maybe you can do it in OTAs and have a little bit of a competition in the spring, but I think they really need to, when they report in July, they got to get going. Like they just got to go. And maybe I don't know, maybe you can have a 2-week competition or something, but I think they need to just pick a guy and go. I think a quarterback competition just slows down the idea of we're implementing this new offense and we need to be ready to go week 1. I don't know how you do that, but I don't think they could spend, 2 or 3. There are only 3 preseason games now. I don't think they could spend 2 preseason games worth of quarter time trying to figure out this quarterback position.
No, they really can't. But here's part of the problem. Part of the problem is the fact that talking up Deshaun Watson goes over like a lead balloon right now. It is not a popular topic. Even though I've been trying to ease people into the notion of Deshaun Watson as their possible starter on opening day in 2026, it's still a tough subject. It's still a tough sell right now. And so I think that they just want to be careful and judicious. If they get to the point where Todd Monkin watches all that film and decides what he wants to do, and the answer comes out, I think we need to give Deshaun Watson a chance. I think they're going to have to figure out how the message is going to be delivered because that's not necessarily going to excite Browns fans. In fact, it might enrage some Browns fans or incense some Browns fans because you forget what he was. You forget what he even did in that Baltimore game when he was healthy. And the truth of the matter, and I've been saying this over and over, is that he hasn't been healthy here. He's either been suspended or he's pretty much been hurt. And that's basically the story of Deshaun Watson's career so far. It doesn't matter. You can pick a season and he was not well. And now, from everything I can gather, from everything I've been told, his arm feels good. The Achilles is good to go. And he's ready to kind of be the player that they thought they traded for. Now, a lot of time has passed and the calendar has flipped over a lot. But I think that's part of it, that I think they are a little bit skittish about trying to sell Deshaun Watson and that they're going to want to be very strategic about that if that is their conclusion.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see how they approach it because I also think at times they've sort of been like, we don't really care that much about optics. But you're right. This fan base has moved past Deshaun Watson so much
Mhm,
that it's kind of, I mean, there were a lot of people that convinced themselves they were going to move on this offseason.
mhm.
Um, that's obviously not going to happen. And now you get to this idea of he's on your roster, he's eating up all this cap space. Get something out of him. That doesn't mean he has to be the starter. He has to obviously earn it. But if he does earn it, if he's the best quarterback in that room, like, as unpopular as it might be, what are you doing? You got to play the guy. So I don't know how they do that. I don't know how Todd Monkin handles that. There's a lot of Shedeur fallout that comes from not choosing Shedeur Sanders as the starting quarterback and not giving him that first crack at QB1. And maybe
So
that's
he
what they want to do. Maybe they come to the conclusion that playing the young guy is the right way to go and figure out what you've got and give yourself some clarity moving into moving into 27 as well. But we're going to be talking a lot about Deshaun this offseason because as long as he's on the roster and as long as he's healthy, they can't really hide him anymore.
No, and I think you've probably heard by now that Myles Garrett sat with Micah Parsons, and he was saying,
Yeah, I did see that.
right, that, we are gonna give Shedeur Sanders, he's gonna be the QB1 heading in because he was the QB1 coming out of 2025, and he's gonna be the QB1. I don't know if you can say that right now. I think it's too early to say that. I don't think Todd Monkin has made up his mind on that. I think that's what they will probably tell us when we're at the combine next week, unless by then they've watched a bunch of film and they're like, "Hey, we have to put our eggs in one of these baskets, and it's going to be this guy." I mean, maybe they'll surprise us and tell us something like that. But I think it's too soon right now. I think just because Miles said that, I don't think that makes it so. I think people assume that's what's happening. And maybe in exit interviews or whatever, maybe that was what had been sort of discussed as a possibility. But remember that this is Todd Monken's offensive show. And it's going to come down to what he wants and who he believes is going to give them the best chance to win.
Yeah, I just don't know that Miles has been super plugged into whatever quarterback planning is going on right now. Like you said, maybe they mentioned some stuff in exit meetings, but they didn't even know who their head coach was going to be at that point. And Miles has been out traveling the world and doing, going to NFL honors, and I don't know, maybe he's going to Milan now to see Chloe Kim compete. I don't know what he's doing, but we're probably not going
Yeah.
to see Miles until we're probably not going to see him until June. So, I'm sure he's had some conversations and I'm sure but I don't think him and Andrew Berry and Todd Monken are having long, deep conversations about the quarterback situation right now.
No, but I mean, Andrew did tell us that they kept Miles apprised of everything that was
Yeah.
going on in the coaching search. So he was part of those discussions. At least they told him what was going on along the way. So maybe that was part of it. Maybe they said, you know, hey, we think we've got something special in Shedeur. We're going to give this a whirl. We're not ready to say it publicly yet, but that's what we think is probably going to happen. So maybe that's where that's coming from. But I still think there's a new sheriff in town now. There's a new sheriff in town, and he's going to get a new pair of eyes on the quarterback situation. And, we will soon see or hear what they are thinking in that regard.
Yeah. And I also don't think, and again, this just goes back to the idea of you can't have a normal conversation about Shedeur Sanders. When I heard Miles say that, I felt like it was sort of yeah, Shedeur ended the year as our QB1, so he's our QB1. You know what I mean? Like, it just almost felt like, yeah, he's QB1 by default. He didn't say it that way, but I think that was just a guy trying to give Micah Parsons. We know how Miles has been with us. Like, he does try to give good, thoughtful answers, and he does try to give real answers. And I think that was him trying to give Micah Parsons a good, thoughtful answer about the quarterback situation. I don't think people should read too much into that.
No, and here's the other thing. Here's the other thing to note about this. They probably don't want a young quarterback like that at this point in time to think that he's got QB1 wrapped up, because they need him in that playbook. They need him studying. They need him working as hard as he possibly can every minute of the day. And he's a worker, but they need to keep that edge. They need to keep him thinking, hey, do I have this? Do I not? And when they kept that going last year, we saw that he rose to the occasion and he for the most part, he worked his tail off and he tried to get better every single week. And he showed flashes of being a quality starter. He showed flashes of it. Even he is the first to tell you that he needs to put that together consistently in a game. It has to be not just flashes, it has to be in 4 minute and 2 minute at all times. So I'm sure that there is some sense of we've got to keep him hungry. We've got to keep Deshaun hungry. We have a natural built-in competition going here, and we can keep that going throughout the offseason, at least. And then, you go through mini camp, you see how that looks, you see how the offseason program looks. And as you mentioned, they can't have too much of a competition into training camp. You can't do that anymore. It's not going to work. They've got to hit the ground running for the most part in training camp with who their starter's going to be. Reps are very limited, and you've got to kind of know who your guy is. And even I was listening to guys talk about Mike McDonald and his approach to OTAs. Did you see that where guys were saying
No,
that
I missed that.
he is really hard on them in OTAs. I mean, like, he's all business in OTAs. That's work. Everybody shows up and they work their tails off in OTAs. And that is basically pre-training camp for them. This is not just like, hey, let's get in shape a little bit and throw the ball around. No, they worked hard during OTAs. And I think that other teams might look at that and kind of want to learn from that.
Well, we're just going to play all the hits today because I mean, we've talked about OTAs and stuff before. And to me, I've often wanted to see the Cleveland Browns, and look, they can't make players show up, obviously, but the team leaders can say, hey, we're doing this. We're going all in. I've often wanted to see them come into an off season like, hey, we haven't done anything. Let's show up day one. And of course they get to start 2 weeks early this year. Let's show up and let's act like we haven't done anything in this league. Let's act like we haven't won anything. And, we've seen those numbers increase. We've seen Denzel Ward kind of embrace that a lot. But yeah, we'll see. We'll just sort of see how Todd Monkin approaches this, and we'll see how some of the Browns players approach this.
Yeah, I mean, you want to show your new head coach how dedicated you are. I think you would want to impress him. I would think that you would want to be there front and center right from the start. And if not to work every single day because you have to take care of your body in a certain kind of way, but to be there to help set the tone, to be the leader that you can be. So I think that that would probably be a good place to start for everyone.
Okay, that'll do it for this Hey Mary Kay edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Those questions from our Football Insider subscribers. That's cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. You get to be a texter. You get a newsletter that we write. Somebody on our Browns team writes every single day. I'm actually writing tomorrow's. Mary Kay, you wrote today's. Ashley will write Wednesdays. So it's the blue banner at the top of the page there. You can find us on our socials too, Orange and Brown Talk on Instagram, Orange Brown Talk on Twitter. And of course, our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.